Uganda has been setting up different strategies to ensure that, one, we establish relations, build on bilateral relations as well. And then also, over the years, we've been strategically placing ourselves in the right positions so that we benefit from the international scene. Now, that said, one may wonder, what is the government doing behind closed doors to ensure that these partnerships or these particular strategies are employed and to also ensure that the objectives are met? This is the discussion we are going to be having this very evening. And for you as a Ugandan out there who has a huge interest in international relations and diplomacy, why not sit back, because we are going to have a conversation where you will definitely want to hear more from the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Permanent Secretary of the same ministry. This is the front bench. But of course, at the backdrop of the entire introduction that I've done, I cannot easily take you into a conversation without introducing the panelists that I do have this very evening. I have two of those who are leading matters to do with the relations from the side of things of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But first is the Honorable Minister for Foreign Affairs, who is none other than Honorable General Odongo JJ Abubakar. Good evening, Honorable. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, listeners. Good evening, viewers. Good evening, fellow citizens and friends.
And with him, he has moved along with the Permanent Secretary of the same ministry, Mr. Bajire Vincent Waiswa, who also joins us this evening to discuss more of the same. A very good evening, PS. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, viewers, and I'm delighted to be here with my minister.
Well, of course, this is a conversation that we are not only doing alone or doing for our own selves, but when it comes to the togetherness and creating room for accountability, we ask you, our dear viewer, this evening to join the conversation using the hashtag UBC Frontbench, because here we believe decisions are made at the front. Now, please come at the front and let's have a conversation together. Good evening. Stick around.
Fellow countrymen and women, these are our ministers and permanent secretaries at the front bench, representing the various ministries and answering the questions that matter to us. Join the conversation. This is the front bench.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Mascari heritage advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archived stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Fellow countrymen and women, these are our ministers and permanent secretaries at the front bench, representing the various ministries and answering the questions that matter to us. Join the conversation. This is the front bench.
0709-602-592 is the WhatsApp number, and the same number for the SMS for those who want to be part of this conversation. Please do note that we are also on YouTube streaming live, so you can also be part of this by sharing your opinions on the same matter of discussion with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But also the hashtag on X, that is UBC Frontbench. Decisions are made at the front. And tonight we are only looking deeper into understanding the nitty-gritties of how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is coming up with these particular strategies that are also key in regards to diplomatic engagements and also strengthening the bilateral relations that we've been seeing over the years or that have been established with the various international partners that we have as a country or other countries that work closely with Uganda. This is the front bench. Like I did mention now, let me get to Honorable Geno Odongo JJ Abubakar. I love the sound of the name, I should tell you. Honorable, let's look into what the ministry does so that the viewer really understands the mandate and the role of your office.
First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to be able to explain to the country, to all our viewers, to all our citizens, who we are, what we do, and where we get the authority to do what we are doing. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs gets the mandate to do what it does from our cardinal law, the Constitution. In particular, it gets specifically what it has to do from the national objectives and principles, principle number 28, and which mandates us to defend and protect the interests and image of the country. And in doing that, we have developed actions, strategies, and plans which we are implementing in accordance with that objective of the Constitution, as well as other frameworks within the country that have been evolved over the period, like the manifesto, like the National Development Plan, and those other frameworks. That is where we get the mandate to do what we are doing.
Well, and Honorable, you've mentioned something to do with the ministry aligning its strategic plans with also the Vision 2040, for example.
Absolutely.
And one may wonder, when you look at us focusing on economic and economic diplomacy,
right,
and also the ministry itself, how has this contributed to Uganda's resource mobilization and also led to national development goals, like the NDP3, for example?
Thank you very much. First of all, before I answer that question directly, we must ask ourselves, how do we come to generate that specific action point you are responding to, or rather you are referring to, the question of economic and commercial diplomacy? Way back in 2001, we, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, re-evaluated ourselves and looked at, as I mentioned earlier, the frameworks, Vision 2040, the National Development Plan, and other such frameworks, and tried to identify and define what we wanted to do. We identified the challenges that the country was going through: poor infrastructure, need for commercial agriculture, and things like that. And we said, how can we plug in to the frameworks that speak to these challenges? And therefore, that's how we, from that period, 2001, started to evaluate ourselves and said, wait a bit, why don't we go out there and participate in the mobilization of resources? And that is basically the essence of economic and commercial diplomacy. As I mentioned, it starts way back in 2001 with a pilot project. Subsequently, it has expanded, resources were allocated, and now we are looking at all missions being part and parcel of this activity in order to continue to mobilize resources in form of mobilizing large numbers of tourists, in form of mobilizing foreign direct investment, in form of expanding markets for our products. So this is essentially what we do.
And PS, on the same point, one may wonder, how does the ministry work with the different missions in Uganda, rather out of Uganda, the different Uganda missions elsewhere, to one, ensure that we have our interests as a country put at the forefront, and then, like the ministers mentioned, something to do with the foreign direct investments, and then you also look at something to do with the export promotion, something that is very critical. How is the ministry ensuring that the economic and diplomatic kind of conversations are heard of?
Well, thank you very much. I think, as the minister has mentioned, part of our core responsibility is promote and protect Uganda's interests. Now, these interests are defined. The interests include Ugandans who live abroad in the diaspora. The interests include positions that Ugandans may want to aspire for in international organizations. The interests include access to markets and market presence, among others. Now, in so doing, as the minister did mention, in 2001, there was a realization that we needed to indeed pursue economic and commercial diplomacy. And this economic and commercial diplomacy is on the advent of the growth of certain sectors in the economy, and that is the energy sector. So as the energy sector has grown, many companies have come to invest in our country. They've come to invest in this country and created industries. Recently, the president was in Kapeka, and in Kapeka, we saw what that industrial park is doing in terms of production of goods. Now, these goods meet the international standards to be able to be marketed across the different markets on the continent and outside of the continent. And therefore, our missions have a duty and responsibility to seek markets, to acquire markets, and get Ugandan companies to indeed export in these particular markets. So what we've done in our missions, we have given the necessary capacity to all our staff, indeed, to undertake economic and commercial diplomacy activities, because indeed, that's where the world is. And as the minister mentioned ably, every person pursues diplomacy for their own interests or for the interests of their countries. And indeed, the team is doing quite well in as far as finding markets is concerned and attraction of foreign direct investment in this country.
Maybe before you raise the question, I just wanted to add to what the PS has mentioned.
Okay.
That the evolving environment around the world has informed us that in the management and distribution of power, two things are significant: the market and the product. And therefore, essentially, that is where we hinge our economic and commercial diplomacy.
And Honorable, let's run it back to 2016. Figures around 4 billion Ugandan shillings allocated to pilot the economic and commercial diplomacy at 8 Ugandan missions. Now, if you can just give us the results and also share with us the tangible outcomes that emerged fast forward to 2024.
Thank you very much. Indeed, as you've correctly pointed out, after the assessment which we carried out, there was a piloting exercise in which economic and commercial diplomacy was piloted in only 8 embassies around the world for us to see whether what we were thinking made sense. I am happy to report that that exercise, that experiment has been successful. And I can speak to about 3 important areas that we can see tangible results. 1, through our economic and commercial diplomacy, we have seen an expansion of markets for our products, particularly our agricultural products across the world. We've been able to access markets over and beyond the region. For example, we've been able to sell our milk to Algeria. We've been able to sell some of our products to Nigeria, and we continue to look for markets far beyond the continent. We have also realized an increase in the number of tourists entering this country because of the engagements carried out in the missions abroad. And you know, the number of tourists translates into income into the country. Thirdly, as the PS did point out, the need for investment in order for us to continue to grow our economy. We have seen a tangible expansion in the foreign direct investment as a result of those efforts. And therefore, I can say that pilot exercise was successful because we can see, and as I pointed out, some tangible results.
And PS, the Honorable mentioned something about tourism. And when you look at tourism and technology, these are the key components of the economic and commercial diplomacy. And one may wonder, which initiatives has the ministry come up with, together with the government, to speak to these particular components and also ensure that there is room for steady progress economically and socially as a country?
Well, I mean, first of all, let me just add on to what the minister said in respect to our mandate. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is responsible primarily for the coordination of the entire government in respect to international relations. And in everything that we do in economic and commercial diplomacy, we do coordinate with the relevant agencies. In this case, the Ministry of Trade, if it's for trade, the Ministry of Agriculture, if it's for agriculture, and for your specific question, the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, as well as the Uganda Tourism Board. We have had an excellent relationship between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Uganda Tourism, the Ministry of Tourism and Uganda Tourism Board, to the extent that we've had collaborations outside of the country, in Europe, for purposes of attracting more tourists to terminate into our country, and not just come into the country, but spend longer times and therefore spend a lot more money in our country. We've done quite a lot of work with colleagues in Kenya, Mombasa specifically, where our mission in Mombasa, a consulate, and the embassy, our embassy in Kenya, have collaborated and brought into Uganda the tour agents that attract millions of tourists into Mombasa to make sure they have farm trips, familiarization trips in Uganda for purposes of getting the people that go to Mombasa to extend their stay for a number of days and visit the unique features or tourist features that are in Uganda. So we've done that with the missions, and we've had some good number of tourists coming into the country. In Europe, certainly, our colleagues in UTB have got companies they have hired to support their mandate of increasing the number of tourists. But as you'll appreciate, Uganda Tourism Board nor the minister do not have a presence in these capitals, but the ministry has a presence. So our staff are the custodians of the interests of Uganda Tourism Board as well as the ministry in respect to attraction of tourists coming into the country.
And General, now let me address you militarily because this next question is heading to that bit of things. We've seen various collaborations with the region where Uganda has actually fostered peace within the entire region, where we've seen our army, the UPDF, going on to successfully handle different missions away from the country. If you can also share some of the other stories from that side of things in regards to the diplomacy and how it has fostered the relations with other countries that we've been able to work with in that regard.
You know, I want to pick again, once again, from what the PS has been talking about. that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is really a coordinating machinery. And when we are talking about issues of this kind, I want us to bear that in mind, that we may not necessarily be doing it physically ourselves, but we continue to coordinate with government ministries, departments, and agencies directly responsible for that activity or action. On the basis of our foreign policy, key to our foreign policy is the question of integration. Integration in the sense that it enables us in the region, immediately in East Africa, but wider in Africa, to be able to speak to each other more closely, in order for us to be able to address security challenges in terms of terrorism, violent extremism, in terms of conflicts, actual conflicts, and in terms of threats to conflicts. And speaking directly to this in our region, you will appreciate the role that Uganda has played in the situation in the South Sudan. You will appreciate the situation, the action that Uganda has continued to play in Sudan, which is a current situation. You will also appreciate the role Uganda plays in the DRC, particularly in the Kivu province. You will also appreciate the role Uganda plays in Somalia in supporting the authorities in Somalia, together with international partners, to fight against Al-Shabaab and to stabilize that country. So, as I mentioned, we act because of our belief that peace and security is essential for other activities, and it should prevail within Uganda and around Uganda.
And P.S., let's get to the economic bit of things. We've been very proponent when it comes to regional integration. You look at the East African community. We've been we were really vital as a country to rebuild the EAC. And then you look at other regional bodies like COMESA. Now we have the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is giving a huge platform for a market worth millions and millions for the Ugandans. When you look at our, leadership and our positioning within these regional bodies, how has it impacted us as a country moving forward, and how has it greatly influenced the social and economic development of this country?
Well, I want to state that first and foremost, much and most of our exports are within the region. We export significantly to South Sudan, to Kenya. By the way, I think 2017, 2018, Uganda had a trade surplus in Kenya, with Kenya, the trade that we do in Kenya. We actually did a lot more trade than they do with us. But if you go back in the years, Uganda was almost a net importer from Kenya and did not export anything to that market. We are doing a lot of trade with Tanzania. We are doing a lot of trade with Eastern DRC, trade with Rwanda, trade with Burundi. So Ugandan companies have found homes in the region selling our products. Having said that, we have non-tariff barriers that occasionally impinge on what we can do. But again, as a ministry responsible for foreign affairs, we have a mechanism and a platform within which we address those issues. In respect to the African Free Continental Trade Area, I think that is one of the best things that has happened on the continent, for one simple reason. We strive for markets in the West, in Europe, yet in actual sense, there are more bigger and significant markets on the continent. There are bottlenecks that we need to address, such as the free movement of people across the entire continent. to ensure, because if you don't have free movement of people, you can't have free movement of goods and services. So the agenda or the task that we have right now is to see to it that we address the issue of Africans traveling across Africa without the impediment of visas. As a ministry, we are responsible for the negotiations, and indeed we have negotiations in that regard. But the reason there is a lot of trade between Uganda and our neighbors, ring states within East Africa, is largely because there is no need for a visa. So you're going to find a Ugandan selling vegetables in South Sudan, in Juba. Why? It was easy for them to travel. There was no barrier whatsoever. You're going to find Ugandans in Kenya going about their business, making money, and indeed making remittances into this economy. So the African Free Continental Trade Area gives us an opportunity in light of the restrictions that we have in markets such as the European Union. Having said that, we need to address a number of things. Those include standards to ensure that our goods meet the necessary standards, and I think the responsible agencies are indeed working on those restrictions. So potentially, as Uganda, we have access to a very huge market. And the other thing that is important to note is many African countries, specifically in West Africa, are doing quite some substantial importation of goods from Europe, which goods reside in different African countries. So that's why the African Free Continental Trade Area is a very, very good opportunity for us indeed to expand our markets on the continent and ensure that the industries and factories that we have in our country have access to markets.
And mark my words, when it comes to the bilateral relations that we've been able to establish as a country, they're very strong. But when we do return after the break, we have huge concerns regarding the trade disputes that have occasionally rocked the region, and how the ministry is working towards the same, or what the ministry has been doing to ensure that our interests are still protected as a country. And then also, one of the questions that has been arising from our hashtag, that is UBC front bench, has been one relating to the cases of immigration and human trafficking concerns, how the ministry is working with partner states to ensure that at least we do not have these bigger questions arising from that center. Now, to you, our dear viewer, please do know that we will return shortly after the break, and we have more conversations, including the refugee policy of the country and what we are doing, because the numbers seem to be increasing day in, day out. And please do note, we are currently the leading when it comes to refugee settlements, or the country that has more refugees on the continent. So you get to realize that we need to open a conversation of the same. This is the front bench, and decisions are made at the front. So if you're still at the back, please come at the front, because after the break, more conversations are supposed to be had. Good evening.
This is the front bench.
At Uganda Development Bank, we are committed to empowering communities by supporting projects that unlock excellent economic benefits for Ugandans through job creation, tax contribution, output value, and foreign exchange. We seek partnerships with projects that drive economic development in Uganda.
Wanatudilinga mumwanyi, kulime mwanyi. Famu ya feni, iliku bugazi bahika, chukuma 25. Mwanyi za feza miaka hivi kati. Wetupata na ikukusimu. Wetupata andikila. Twataneka neika 10. Wetupata neika 10 zwakulanga pilot project. Hakata aho, esente zali ntono nga gwochimanyi wano mu Uganda. Kati nasalawo okutukira UDB. Kati bwatukira UDB, nawe tebaba babi sente bakola ki bazituweereza. Kati ne tutandika guno mu mukola ki gwe mulaba. Kati mu kutandika guno mu gwe mulaba tuguze mu bingi kwangu laba tuli ku drip system. Then kanu katwakada Israeli eleze sente zimu ezakugura okuva Israeli. Then nokutuyamba mu bakozi okusema the reservoir nezi no control room zinagola bagwe generator whatever yona yaba jona mu UDB. wano ng'abalimi bonna abalonde mu Uganda waliwo abeesobola walimu abateesobola batukirire UDB kubanga ffe etuyambye n'etuwa buli kimu okutwaliza wamu mu UDB tufunyeemu.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Mascari Heritage Advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archive stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Fellow countrymen and women, these are our ministers and permanent secretaries at the front bench, representing the various ministries and answering the questions that matter to us. Join the conversation. This is the front bench.
Well, conversations that matter to us, and the us in question is you, my viewer, this very evening. Please do note that a few weeks back, reports came on, developments came in that Rwanda is the leading export market for our sugar. Now, when it comes to the regional cooperation and regional trade, you get to realize that we've been dealing and exporting our products, not only agro-based products, but also services have been exported to various East African countries. And before we went into the break, that has been a concern. And we want to know, when you look at the trade disputes that have occasionally rocked the region, one may wonder, this left some of the traders stranded, asking where are we going to look for the market? Of course, we then regain. At times we have these are like brotherly fights, I should say, but then we regain these markets. And Honorable, when it comes to this element of trade disputes, how have you been able to address them? Or how are you addressing any pending dispute to ensure that our interests as a country are protected?
Thank you very much. Once again, it is true that it's as we interact with our neighbors, as we interact with our markets, occasionally some conflicts do arise. But particularly for our neighborhood, the countries neighboring us, and indeed even countries farther apart, we have a framework called the Joint Permanent Commission or the Joint Ministerial Commission. This framework enables Uganda with an entity like Kenya, where such a conflict arises, to be able to sit under that framework and discuss this matter and indeed many other matters. I wanted to inform you that whereas it is a framework under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it is actually a framework for engaging across the government with our neighbors also across government. So we only provide a framework through which the government of Uganda, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, organizing other entities, ministries, departments, and agencies to work on and resolve these matters. On the question of trafficking of persons, I think it is an equally complicated, interesting, but a very concerning question for all of us. There are unscrupulous individuals who take advantage of our desire, of our need, and sometimes desperation for work. We continue, one, to try to educate our citizens on the dangers of being trafficked and the possible ways through which this takes place. We continue to work with other entities in Uganda, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Police Department, and the intelligence communities. And we also continue to work with our missions abroad to see to it that we are trying to address this when it does happen.
Okay. And well, before I run to the PS, Honorable Minister, the refugee policy, currently hosting 1.7 million refugees in the country within our settlements, and the prediction is we may hit 1.8 or more by the end of the year. I want you to paint for us a picture of how has this, which kind of reputation have we built as a nation hosting these refugees, and how are the international bodies looking at our refugee policy? Then at the same time, we've of course been having reports or seeing reports coming in revealing that some of those who have been helping us run these refugee settlements by sending in some of the fundings, they are cutting some of the fundings. One may wonder, what are we going to do to pretty much look into our refugee policy so that we are not heading into a zone where it will become too worse for us?
It is true that at this material time as we speak, Uganda is hosting 1.7 million refugees. And one would like to ask, why are there these refugees? These are Africans from countries mainly bordering us, from South Sudan, from DRC, and now we are beginning to see refugees coming from Sudan, coming from Somalia, walking into Uganda. Our policy as a country is what has been termed as an open door policy. This is hinged on the belief and direction by His Excellency the President that Uganda will provide sanctuary and home to all Africans who seek restitution from the instability in their countries. Uganda becomes attractive because of the level of peace and security in this country. We maintain an open door policy, and it is attractive in that it is quite different from many other policies in management of refugees. Different countries, when you get there, you are put in camps. In Uganda, we put all those Africans and indeed other citizens who find refuge in Uganda into settlements. The basis of using settlements rather than camps comes from our knowledge that the pride, particularly of an African man, is to fend for his family. Dislocation that causes them to move and become refugees takes away the dignity of the man to fend for himself. So our open door policy creates for them a settlement in which refugees are granted a space, a piece of land, where they can raise a tent or a hut for their family, where they can grow their food so that the family is able to recognize that they are living in conditions very much similar to the conditions before they were dislocated. And in so doing, we restitute the dignity that the man had lost.
And well, to finance the current budget of 2024-2025, the Uganda Revenue Authority needs to collect 31.98 trillion. That is from the revenue mobilization. That is also geared towards financing the 72 trillion budget that we are running under this very year. Now, when it comes to revenue mobilization, you get to realize that remittances by the diaspora contribute 4% to the GDP of the nation. And this brings me to my other question that is heading to the Permanent Secretary. Piers, when you look at these figures, 4%, one may wonder, beyond just the remittances, what is the ministry doing to engage the diaspora to continue being part of the developmental goals of this country and also ensure social economic development and transformation?
Well, the ministry, as you may be aware, as a department responsible for the diaspora. And this department has a duty to first and foremost look after the interests of the diaspora. And in this regard, we offer them consular services. And these consular services include, among other things, acquisition of passports for themselves and the children they may have or that may be born in their places of abode, as well as national ID and so on and so forth. And all this is done in our missions, the missions that we have abroad. But beyond that, there is a consistent and regular engagement between our embassies and the diaspora. Just 2 weeks ago, our ambassador in Pretoria, as well as colleagues from State House, were in South Africa engaging the Ugandans that live in South Africa as the diaspora and mobilizing them to invest in their country. In 2 weeks' time, our colleagues in Abu Dhabi will be having a similar event for one singular purpose, to mobilize that diaspora to go beyond remittances and come back and invest in this country. We have in the US, we have Ugandans. You may have read in the Monitor over the other weekend, where there is a Ugandan that runs a logistics company.
In the US?
In the US. We are mobilizing all these to come and take advantage in the oil and gas sector, because there are opportunities in the oil and gas sector for logistics, and these are well established. So we are in touch, and we maintain an elaborate database where these people in the diaspora voluntarily give us their information and say, we work in the IT space as an example. We have people working high-end jobs in the US, in Microsoft, Amazon, Ugandans, Boeing, name it all. And they've all come to us and said, we want to give back to our country, we want to make a contribution. And it is on that basis that indeed, this very year, we are planning to have an engagement with them in December under the theme of a diaspora for national development. We are mobilizing them at the moment, and we are confident that out of those engagements, many of them will come back and invest. But having said that, we also have a profile of those who are invested in this country. They built hospitals, they're into farming, poultry farming, they're into commercial agriculture, a good number of them, real estate. There are many of them that are indeed contributing already to the economy. But what we want to do is to move to where our brothers in Ethiopia did, to mobilize them to be able to fund and contribute to the Grand Renaissance Dam that was built primarily from resources that were mobilized through a diaspora bond. So we are having discussions in that direction, because we know and believe that for some of the infrastructure projects in this country, we can mobilize funding through the diaspora, Ugandan diaspora. So we're working towards that.
P.S., just let's get back to the homecoming summit you've mentioned here in your submission. Let's look into it pretty much. What objectives are we having with this inaugural homecoming event that is going to see those in the diaspora taking part? One may wonder, what are the objectives that the ministry intends to achieve with this event?
The objective, first of all, Ugandans in the diaspora occasionally come back to the country in December for Christmas holidays. They come back quietly and go away quietly. Nobody recognizes. So we want to take advantage of their presence here and then have a conversation, a very well-guided conversation. First of all, they have issues or challenges they have related to service delivery or the services they expect from us, from them as the diaspora. So want to have an opportunity to sit with them and know the challenges and find a solution and address those ones. But primarily, as I said earlier, we want to mobilize them for national development. Because, as I said, if you have a Ugandan who has a successful logistics firm in the US, it means he can come to Uganda and do a lot more and add on to our economy. So we want to work with them to create employment so that we avert the human trafficking that you mentioned, yes, where young Ugandans and specifically young girls are lured into so-called lucrative jobs out of Uganda, and indeed they end up being trafficked in a number of countries. So that's basically the primary reason as to why we shall be having this engagement with the diaspora.
Maybe just to add to what the PS has just mentioned.
Yes.
The PS has used the word to mobilize. Why are we going in that direction? Many of Ugandans living out there have had a raw deal. Mr. Kiza sends money here as an individual. His money is taxed. When his parents or whatever destination he sent that money to, it is misappropriated. So what we are trying to do is to say, guys, look this way. Why don't you come together so that these individual remittances can be put together and it comes as a chunk which then can be used for national development. This is the mobilization we are talking about.
And for us as the Gen Z, in our language, we will definitely be calling in our summer friends to get to the summit because it is the time when they are returning and they have some dollars to spend. But pretty much it would be good if at all these dollars are spent in a way that adds a lot of value to the country. Now, earlier this year in January, some of the Ugandans got to know about some new terms, NAM, G77 plus China summits. For the history students like myself, we really had some background study about the same over the years. Now I'm getting to the Honorable Minister in this regard. Earlier this year, we did not only host, but we are now holding the chairmanship of both the non-allied movement and G77 plus China. Now one may wonder, how do we position ourselves as a country to ensure that one, we represent the South, and then also represent the interests of Uganda in regards to global affairs?
Thank you very much. Indeed, you are absolutely correct that Uganda hosted back-to-back, historical, first time ever, NAM as well as G77 plus China.
Yes.
We are talking about NAM. What is NAM? NAM is the non-aligned movement. It has a history to the Cold War, when we had the capitalists and the communists, and they sought to recruit others that did not belong to those camps into those camps. There was a resistance particularly from the emerging countries, newly independent countries, to say we do not want to be aligned to either the East or to the West. We want to be aligned to ourselves. So none aligned to the two camps. This is the idea that people like Bros Tito, people in Indonesia like Suharno and others brought on board and evolved into this organization called the Non-Aligned Movement. Today, as we speak, the Non-Aligned Movement boasts of 121 members. The G77, that's the group of 77, at the time it was formed, as it expanded, they determined to retain that name, 77, plus China. Today, it holds a membership of 134 countries. So these are huge. These are powerful organizations which now Uganda chairs. Uganda is chairing the NAM movement for the year 2024 to the year 2027. Uganda is also chairing the G77 plus China for this year 2024. These organizations provide a very powerful platform. They provide the Global South with a voice in the global affairs. Uganda's chairmanship, particularly of the NAM, is geared towards ensuring that this organization, we propel this organization to work for the common good of mankind. We would like to influence decisions in the international arena so that those decisions are favorable to the Global South and the membership of NAM. Issues like climate change, issues like debt sustainability, issues around growth and development, and issues around security and stability in the world. Indeed, President Museveni, when he spoke during the NAM summit here, he clearly pointed out that NAM should work for global affluence. The desire is that we uplift everybody so that we are all affluent and we do not leave anybody behind. Recently, we had this pact of the future, a debate on the future we want. What eventually emerged as a document, the Pact of the Future, was significantly influenced by the discussions and input of both the G77 and NAM, which Uganda chaired and spearheaded. So that is how, one, Uganda benefits as a global South, but also how it contributes to the global agenda.
Honorable, on that point, let's talk terrorism. Terrorism has been a global threat, and over the past few years, Uganda has also been on high alert in regards to preparedness in case of any terrorist attack. We've seen at times the US also listing us and also warning some of its citizens residing in here on a few occasions, obviously. But when you look at our efforts in terms of our foreign efforts and then our military efforts towards preventing terrorism, how far have we reached, and what vote of confidence can the Ugandans and the viewer watching today pick from you in regards to the same?
It is true we've suffered from terrorism for quite some time, from way back from mid-90s, if I may say. And this came to the surface more when bombs were exploded in Nairobi, bombs were exploded in Dar es Salaam in 1998, when the Twin Towers in New York were blown. That is when the world woke up to the danger of terrorism. As a country, we have confronted this, particularly because largely for Uganda, it has been rural terrorism. in the form of Alice Lakwena, in the form of COI, in the form of ADF. Our military and security services have effectively dealt with this scourge, and as I speak today, we can comfortably say terrorism is on the back pedal. Few elements remain. Our military and security agencies continue to engage them, and we believe we will all be eliminated. The case of Somalia, for example, is a good case. We volunteered when everybody thought it was impossible. Uganda volunteered. 2007, went into Somalia, fought Al-Shabaab. Other colleagues, partners joined us. Today, Somalia is a different country. We now have a government. We have arrangements to continue to stabilize that country, and Uganda is significantly involved in that effort.
And P.S., let me take your parting shots as we're winding up with our conversation this very evening. But in your parting shots, I need you to help us and give us a futuristic view of what the ministry is doing to ensure that we sustain the relationships that we've built with countries like the UAE, the United Kingdom, South Africa, and the others that are in discussion, and then also regionally, and then also the efforts that the ministry has come up with to ensure that we recover from the COVID-19 shocks that pretty much shocked the entire world in regards to diplomacy, the economy, and the social affairs.
Well, the ministry certainly has a duty and responsibility to do one fundamental thing, which is what indeed diplomats do: engage, 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 and engage. So our ministry continues to engage with all countries on a bilateral front, but also in the multilateral settings that we subscribe to. We subscribe to many international organizations for the simple reason that we need to be present when critical issues that affect us are being discussed. As you'll appreciate, you did mention NAM and G77, and indeed, the reason we sought to chair the two organizations was to increase our significance from a diplomatic viewpoint. And we have done that responsibility extremely well. Our Ambassador Adonia was given credit for his coordination of the group by the Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, which means that indeed, as a country, our profile has certainly increased by virtue of chairing NAM and G77, which are coordinated out of our New York office, and therefore the permanent representative is extremely relevant in that regard. Having said that, we have so many activities that we have lined up. You mentioned the UK. The UK are responsible and custodians of CHOGM, the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit, and there is a meeting happening very soon. Our Vice President will be leading a delegation for that particular meeting as a mechanism of continuing the engagement and being part and parcel of the Commonwealth family, where indeed we generate some projects that benefit Ugandans, amongst the youth, women, and others. And of course, certainly, we have platforms such as the African Union. We shall be at the summit in February to participate. We have platforms such as IGAD, the Intergovernmental Authority for Development, where Uganda is a very, very active member, ICGLR, ESC, among others. So as a ministry, we shall continue our duty for one singular reason: to be present to promote and protect the interests of Uganda in those platforms.
Again, thank you very much. Honorable Minister, in your parting shots, my viewer would wish to know what are the key objectives on the global stage that the ministry is looking at, especially when it comes to its foreign policy, to ensure that we have that sustainability, which is very crucial, and building on our bilateral relations.
Maybe let me put it differently.
Okay.
What is the embodiment of our foreign policy in order to respond to those?
Okay.
3 things. 1, our foreign policy remains robust, and it has delivered tangible and visible results, as we have seen through the discussion we've been having. 2, our foreign policy continues to evolve and respond to the needs, to the issues as and when they arise in the region, globally, and continues to resolve and work with those. Thirdly, our foreign policy continues to respond and to be shaped by our national interests, as well as the dynamics in terms of balance between our national interests as well as regional and global situations and environment. That, in a nutshell, tells you where we are and where we are going.
Okay. Where we are and where we're going. There is a Vision 2040 for Uganda, and as we will be switching to NDP4, you realize that everything each ministry within the country is doing is to ensure that we are hitting the same and we are moving in the same direction, regardless of the objectives that each have. In this show, we've been discussing issues global, issues foreign, issues international. And at the same time, please do note that next week when we do return on Monday, we shall be having another ministry to break down and see what the ministry has got in terms of initiatives and what they do to ensure that you as a Ugandan get to benefit, because we are questioning the ministry and also giving them room to speak directly to you and also create room for accountability. Now, my 2 guests this evening have been from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. One has been the Honorable Minister, General Odongo J.J. Abubakar. Again, thank you very much, General, for joining us.
My pleasure indeed. It's been a wonderful, great evening with you.
And pleasure is ours having you here on the show. And with him, he has moved with the Permanent Secretary, or the PS, of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Bajire Vincent Waiswa, who has also been part of the panel here. Again, PS, thank you very much for being part.
Thank you very much, and good night to our viewers.
And to all of you who have been sending in your messages, thank you very much for being part of the discussion this very evening. And on the hashtag, that is UBC Frontbench, thank you very much. Till next week, and of course, as we bring you a new ministry, or a different ministry, not new, but a different ministry, to speak directly to you. I am JORAM Paul SSONKO, and we wish you all the best for this new week. Have yourselves a blessed night and a good evening.
This is the Front Bench.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
A woman's journey is not just the places she's been, but the different people she's become. It's the evolution of her identity. If you're a female creative, a writer, a passionate actress, a producer, a director, or working in the film industry, this is your tribe. Join